You're listening to the Weekend Sport Podcast with Jason Pine from News Talk ZB. Football Fever with News Talk ZB's voice of football, Jason Pine and Bonnie Jansen.
Welcome into Football Fever, your weekly football podcast for all things Wellington Phoenix men and women, New Zealand men's and women's national teams, and Kiwis playing around the world as well. I'm Jason Pine. Bonnie Jansen's here too. G'day, Bon.
G'day, Piney. How are you?
Very good. Good weekend. We faced a bit of a challenge, though, over the weekend because the Phoenix men and the Football Ferns both played at the same time on Saturday afternoon. And, well, much as we can do a lot of things, we can't watch two things at once with real scrutiny. So I was at the Phoenix game. Bonnie took one for the team and watched the Ferns. Not that was necessarily a bad thing. We've each seen highlights of the game we didn't watch live, but I thought what we'd do today is ask each other a few questions about the game we didn't see live. So let's start with the Ferns. Oceania Olympic qualifying. They won their first game against Tonga 3-0, probably should have won by more. Game 2, New Zealand 6, Samoa 0. How much better, or not, were New Zealand against Samoa compared to Tonga? And who are the players who stood out for you?
Yeah, it was definitely a better performance. I think we can't be super critical of it because, when you're playing these teams that are, with all respect to Samoa, they're not as good as us. So you always drop to those levels when you're playing a much weaker team. So I think the Ferns were better. It still worries me on the goal front and in terms of, how clinical can we be in the box? But overall, yes, better performance, better scoreline, and yeah, I thought it was a good team picked by Yitka. In terms of players that stood out to me, I think Grace Jarley's doing really well, and she just looks more confident on the ball every game she plays, and I think, she's having a really good season with Perth Glory, so she was looking good. But also Macy Fraser, and this is no bias, you and I are both from Wellington, and we've been watching her kind of grow throughout the season, but I think she's a real shoo-in to go to the Olympics with this Ferns team. She looked really good, and again, I don't know if it's these types of games where they're easier opponents, so it gives the Football Ferns more time on the ball, and that obviously suits Fraser's playing style, but she looked really good and scored another cracking goal from a dead ball.
So my second question then is about the goal scoring, because people will look at it and say, aren't you being a bit harsh? 6-0 is a convincing scoreline, and a clean sheet. 9 goals scored in 2 games without conceding any. Or were you looking for double-digit scores here in these 2 games?
I was looking for double digits, and, based on the Ferns' kind of last 18 months, we know it's no secret they've really struggled to score. So, for their sake, they needed to go out into this tournament and make a statement and score in double digits. And, we talked last week on the podcast, and I was quite optimistic in the fact that, women's football's growing and these island nations were kind of going to be a bit more competitive, and maybe they are. But, it's just little errors, Jackie Hand, who just and I rate her so much as a player, but kicking straight to the goalkeeper, same with Indy Paige Riley, it's little stuff like that, and I hope only these games and they're getting more in and around the box is going to give them that confidence to shoot a name for the corners. I don't know, I'm not in their position, so it might sound a bit harsh, but yeah, I still think there's some serious issues with being clinical in front of goal.
And my third question is around the starting 11. You sent it to me just before kickoff and said, look at this team. It looks really good. And I agree. It looked like a really solid starting 11. You had the likes of Katie Bowen coming back in, for example, and she always makes things a lot tighter at the back. Jackie Hand was there, India Paige Riley, and Elite in goal, which I really like, with no disrespect to the other goalkeepers. How much do you think Yitka will tinker for the third group game? New Zealand are now through to the semi-finals, regardless of what happens against Vanuatu in their final group game. Do you think she'll tinker for game 3 and then lock in his strongest 11 for the semis and hopefully the final? Or do you think she'll go strong again with 3 games to go, just get her best side out there for those 3 games?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. These games are quite relaxed, which shouldn't be the approach, but Yitka, I guess, does have options. But yeah, as I said to you, it was a really good lineup, and me too. I also like an elite in goal. I don't know if you saw in the highlights if they played it, but she had a little muck up. It was after we scored the first goal, but Samoa had a real chance for an equaliser, and Elite couldn't quite clear it, and it was touch and go for a minute. Basically, they had a shot on an open goal. But in saying that, I really like an Elite there. The lineup was very good. I think she will tinker with it a bit. It's probably only fair to give players a shot when the games aren't, that tight, and we should hopefully still win regardless. But in saying that, the Olympics is on the horizon if we're to win this tournament, and maybe we need to give these players all the time they can get together to gel. So it is a tricky question, but no doubt we'll probably see some new faces coming into the third game.
Do you think the heat will be an issue as well? It is hot over there, so 5 games, in the heat is a lot to ask. So do you think now that qualification for the semis is secure, that maybe that is also a factor? Players who have played a big part in the first 2 games might get that rest and then be a bit fresher for the semis?
Yeah, no, you're not wrong, exactly. And I have still been surprised by, I believe she gave Macy Fraser a full 90 in the first game, Kate Taylor a full 90 in the second game, other players as well. And it is long to keep them out there. I know you can't sub off every player that started the match, but it looks pretty hot over there. So it makes sense. We've qualified for a quarterfinal. Let's see some new faces and hopefully, that can score some goals.
Just back to Macy Fraser, and admittedly I didn't watch the entire game, although I see she was substituted at half-time, or just after the break, wasn't it? Or was it at half-time? Anyway, the fact remains she played the first 45, scored a goal, another dead ball situation as you outlined. I feel like she's, as you said before, now mounting an almost irresistible case to be a part of the Football Ferns moving forward, and certainly for the Olympic Games. She just, from what I've seen in the first game that I watched and then the highlights of the second, she looks by far our most creative player.
Oh, absolutely. And New Zealand doesn't really produce players like that are so good on the ball. You can even look at the men's side and compare, maybe the likes of Joe Bell or Sarpreet Singh, but we don't have a lot of players like that. So when one comes along, we really have to kind of look after them and give them as many opportunities as we can. And, I mentioned that these games aren't as tough, so it gives Macy a lot more time on the ball. But, we've got to build up her confidence she's a really exciting player to watch. She can score goals herself. She can also create opportunities. She was involved in another couple of goals as well. So, she's definitely making her case, that's for sure. Yeah,
it might be that she's one of the ones who drops out. Who knows? We'll wait and see what happens against Vanuatu in the final group game. That is tomorrow, Tuesday, 4:00, and then New Zealand will almost certainly play the loser of the Solomons-Fiji game, which is the third group game in the other group. Whoever wins that game will finish top of that group, and whoever loses it will be second almost certainly. So it'll be one of the Solomons or Fiji likely on Friday, and the final is next Monday with a ticket to Paris for the eventual winners.
Football Fever with Jason Pine and Bonnie Jansen.
So that was the Football Ferns. That was a good afternoon's work for them. Let's go to the Wellington Phoenix against Western United. The Phoenix winning 2-0, goals early in each half. Nico Pennington scoring in the 3rd minute and then being in and around the second goal, which was diverted into his own net by James Donaghy of Western United. 5 points clear at the top. Biggest lead at the top of the table in the club's history. The 33 points, the Mariners and MacArthur 28, Melbourne Victory 27, having played one less game, and 12 points back to 7th. That's important because the top 6, of course, make the playoffs. They are 7 games unbeaten this calendar year. Those are the bare-based facts. Bonnie, what are your questions about this game for me?
Piney, obviously you called that, and, you just said it, 5 points clear at the top of the table. Firstly, kind of, can you believe that your Wellington Phoenix, our Wellington Phoenix, are in this position right now in the season?
I think it's becoming more and more believable. I think a lot of people in the first sort of half a dozen games and then the first 10 games and then maybe the first dozen games sort of thought, okay, well, at some point this is all going to stop. At some point this team will it'll correct itself. And that's a very, very unusual term to use here, seeing they're playing so well. But Phoenix teams of the past have tended to sort of live in and around the middle of the table, right? That's where they've been. And when they've made the top six, it's normally been in fourth, fifth or sixth. But the longer the season has gone, the more it feels as though this isn't anything other than what this Wellington Phoenix team is now all about. I feel like they are now the best team in the A-League men's as we look at it right now. And you look at the results over the weekend, they kind of bear this out. Melbourne Victory, of course, have been very good, unbeaten, but they lost that unbeaten record over the weekend with their first loss of the season. Melbourne City had 5 put past them by Brisbane Roar, who have been very up and down this season. Very, very up and down indeed. The Central Coast Mariners losing to, albeit a very good Sydney FC side. All the time, Wellington Phoenix just keep on keeping on. The only team that's really in as much form as they are at the moment is Macarthur, who they play on Sunday, who are also 7 games unbeaten. So that's a very long-winded way of saying, Bonnie, that actually I am starting to believe, and that they say the table doesn't lie. The Phoenix are 5 points clear at the top.
I mean, I guess it always helps when those other results, as you say, are playing in the Phoenix favour. But again, as you pointed out, they have just stuck with it and they've been consistent. So, yeah, really exciting. Obviously, that 2-0 win on the weekend. What did you make of that match? Obviously, Nico Pennington, unbelievable. Yeah,
I mean, and lovely to see him score a goal. He doesn't get a lot of goals back from suspension and had a good game, I thought. So did Alex Rufus, so did Mohamed El Tay. I think those three just continue to play really, really well in the heart of Wellington's engine room. There wasn't a heck of a lot else happening up top, if I'm honest. Not too many other chances, really clear-cut chances. But I think what Wellington are doing now is doing what they should do against the lesser teams. Often you hear about a team coming into a game and you say, okay, well, that team could be a banana skin. I mean, Western United have been really mediocre this season. Just 8 points in, 14 games now? 15 games, I think it is. 8 points in 15 games. That speaks to a team that really is down on its luck. So when they turn up at the top of the table team, I feel like the top of the table team should impose themselves, beat their chest a little bit, put their mark on the game. And while it wasn't a 4 or 5-0 thrashing, I think Wellington are now doing what they have to do against lesser teams. They're exploiting weaknesses. Western United are slow starters in each half, and that's when Wellington got their goals. They stayed tight at the back and really cruised to the 3 points, if I'm brutally honest, Bonnie. There was never really, once they went 2-0 ahead, any way back for Western United. They had a couple of half chances. Daniel Peña's a good player. But it never felt, once they went 2-0 ahead, that Wellington were going to lose that match. And I think that's the mark of a team that's very high on confidence compared to one like Western United, who never really believed, I don't think, that they were going to get back into that game.
We've seen, a few different lineups over the last, or basically all season, really, and that's been due to the fact of injuries and suspensions and things like that recently. Do you think, we're still a few games away from the playoffs, but do you think Giancarlo Italiano has an idea of who his best 11 is yet?
Good question. Really good question. I think he probably says to himself, what is my best 11 for this game? Rather than saying, okay, well, regardless of the opposition, this is my best 11. Because he does tend to take a bit of a horses for courses approach on occasion. This is, of course, when he's got a full suite of players to choose from. Quite often this season he hasn't had that. We still haven't got Oscar Zavada back, for example. A couple of games in this latest stretch, they were without the likes of Alex Rufus, Tim Payne, Nicholas Pennington with suspension. So his hand was almost forced in many ways. But I think if he had a fully fit squad, I think, you could probably write down maybe 8 or 9 players who you'd say, okay, those are the players who will play regardless of the opposition. And you look at guys who have played every week and every minute, and Scott Wootton and Finn Sermon are clearly the centre-back pairing. Alex Paulson's clearly your goalkeeper. Alex Rufus plays every week that he's available and is so influential. But then you think, okay, what do you do with Ben Old, for example? For me, one of the brightest young talents going around, but is he better used in some circumstances off the bench? Is he a better impact player than he is maybe a starting player? And then what do you do when Oscar Zavada does come back? Who drops out of that front four? Costa's been playing well. David Ball is very industrious. Božidar Krajev is having an excellent season. And then you look around midfield, and we've got Houston Salas now coming into this roster, by the sounds of things, going to be involved against MacArthur on Sunday. So whose position does he take if, in fact, he does come into the starting lineup? So every coach will tell you, Bonnie, as you know, that they like these headaches. They'd rather have these headaches than be scrambling around trying to put a team together.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a good problem to have. I saw Houston Salas made an appearance, came and said hey to the Yellow Fever on Saturday night. Just on him, I mean, you mentioned he's likely going to be involved this weekend, but would you want to see him start that match?
I don't know. I don't think so, if I'm honest. There were a couple of injury concerns in the game against Western United. Both Alex Rufer and Nicholas Pennington went off with little niggles. So as long as they're fit, I think they both have to start again, and I think Mo El-Tay does as well. He was my man of the match, actually, on the weekend. I thought Mo El-Tay was he came back from injury, had an excellent game. So I think it would be very hard on, well, they're not going to drop the captain. Rufer's going to play. I think it would be hard on Pennington or El-Tay if they dropped out of the starting lineup for a just-arrived Houston Salas. I think he'll be eased in. He'll be in the matchday squad almost certainly against MacArthur. It's just what use do they make of him? They'd want to get him on the grass as quickly as possible. There are only 10 games to go in the regular season and then on to the playoffs. So he needs to be integrated into the team. But my gut would say no, he won't start, but he will be involved in some capacity on Sunday.
And lastly, just a note on Costa Barbarouses. Obviously, he went through that great ride where he scored in 5 straight games, I believe, and now it's 5 games without scoring. He seems to be in a bit of a lull. Are you worried about this?
No, not really. I'm not, because he's still getting involved. He had a big part to play in the first goal on Saturday. He played the ball across that Božidar Krajev then reversed back into the path of Pennington for the opening goal. I think Costa still offers a lot of other things, including his goal scoring. He's assisted a lot of goals this season as well. He's high on confidence. He's a senior player. He's been there and done that over 330-odd games in the A-League men. So, no, I'm not worried at all. And it's funny because we worried when Oscar Zavada wasn't there. Now, as you say, Costa hasn't scored for 5 games, but the team just continues to get results. I got message this morning by my Sky co-commentator Jacob Spoonley saying, make sure you point out on the podcast that the last 3 goals for the Phoenix have all come down the right-hand side and have all involved 13-plus passes. See, this is the sort of thing Jacob Spoonley does in his spare time. He goes back and he counts passes in scoring movements. But, it's a good point that he makes that the Phoenix do string passing movements together. And you look at the suppliers of the goals and the scorers of the goals, the last 3, Pennington, an own goal, and Božidar Krajev. So no Zavada, no Barbarouses, no apparent problem for this team, Bonnie.
Yeah, no, those goals on the weekend, I saw the highlights and exceptional team goals, as you mentioned, and they keep getting the job done, and hopefully they can again this weekend. It's kind of a top-of-the-table clash against the MacArthur Bulls, so that's at 7 o'clock on Sunday night, so come on, Phoenix. Yeah,
can't wait. 7 games unbeaten MacArthur, 7 games unbeaten Wellington, couple of Phoenix old boys in that MacArthur side, of course, with the likes of Clayton Lewis and Uli Davila. And, of course, Tommy Smith is now a MacArthur player as well. So a real Kiwi or Phoenix connection between these two teams. Understand they're going to stay in Australia, head on to Perth for their next game, which is the following Saturday night.
This is Football Fever.
Just want to finish with some Kiwis playing overseas. Libby Cacace, massive win for Empoli in Serie A. 90 minutes for Libby Cacace. They beat the bottom side, Salernitana, 3-1. Moves them out of the relegation zone by 2 points and 4 games unbeaten now. And good to see Libby playing a big part in that. Matt Garbett, we thought he was injured, but clearly not as badly as first feared. He came off the bench for NAC Breda in their latest game. Matt Dibley-Diaz had the armband for Fulham's under-21s in their latest game. Be interesting to see if he features in the upcoming All Whites squads. And Callum McCowart coming off the bench and scoring the winner for Suckelborg in their latest outing in the Atlantic Cup. Among the females, CJ Bott started as Leicester beat Birmingham 6-2 to move into the quarterfinals of the Women's FA Cup. That's CJ Bott's first start since December. So good to know she's good for 90 minutes now. And Rhea Percival finally got a start at right back for Crystal Palace, where she is on loan after 3 games off the bench. Hit the post, I think, Rhea Percival, and was part of a 2-1 win. So Kiwis doing good things around the world at the moment as well. All right, Bonnie, well, another interesting week ahead. Actually, just before we go, the Wellington Phoenix women, we haven't mentioned them at all today because they didn't play over the weekend, but they do have a game coming up this coming weekend without about 1,000 of their players who are on Football Ferns duty. Do you think Paul Temple can cobble together a team that can get the job done across the Tasman on Sunday?
Yeah, I thought Paul Temple, I heard he was a little bit annoyed about the scheduling of this Oceania tournament, and it is a tricky one, seeing all the other teams aren't missing a whole lot of players at the moment, but surely he can, and yes, they're key players that he's going to be without, but it'll be a good test to their depth this weekend.
Yeah, Western United are the opposition. Annalie Longo has come home from Samoa. I thought that might be one of those where there'd been an agreement made that she would come home and feature for the Phoenix on Sunday against Western United, but by the sounds of things, it is actually a genuine injury which has forced Annalie Longo to come home, so she likely won't be available to take on Western United away on Sunday. Okay, Bonnie, well, have an excellent week. Enjoy yourself watching the Football Ferns hopefully score a lot more goals against Vanuatu tomorrow, and we'll reconvene next Monday. In fact, next Monday, hopefully, we'll be previewing the Football Ferns in the final of Oceania Olympic qualifying, just 90 minutes away from Paris, we hope. Thanks, as always, for popping in on the pod.
Sounds good, Piney. We'll touch base then.
The FFP with Piney and Bonnie. For more from Weekend Sport with Jason Pine, listen live to News Talk ZB weekends from midday or follow the podcast on iHeartRadio.